It began with Ethan Miller, a man who believed in simplicity, independence, and the power of innovation. After years of working as an electrical engineer in the city, he finally retired and moved to Maple Ridge Estates, a peaceful community tucked between rolling hills, clean roads, and homes that all looked almost exactly the same. That uniformity was what drew most people here, but for Ethan, it was just background noise. He didn't move to Maple Ridge to fit in. He moved there to build the kind of home that matched his beliefs. Using his years of experience, he designed an eco-friendly house from the ground up, one that could run entirely off solar energy. Every wire, every battery cell, and every panel was part of a system that worked in harmony with nature. When the sun rose, his lights flickered to life. When the wind blew, his smart vents cooled the air. For Ethan, it wasn't just a house. It was proof that he didn't need anyone else's power to live comfortably. For the first few weeks, everything was perfect. His mornings began with birdsong instead of traffic, and his nights were quiet, broken only by the hum of his system working silently under the stars. Neighbors waved politely as they passed by, though most didn't understand what Ethan was building. To them, his shiny black solar panels looked out of place among the beige rooftops and identical lawns. But he didn't care. He checked every law, every regulation, and every code before installing them. They were permitted, legal, and paid for in full. Yet, trouble began not from what Ethan did wrong, but from who noticed. Her name was Karen Blake, president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. She was known for her sharp suits, tighter smile, and the habit of inspecting everyone's property as if she personally owned it. She didn't like surprises, especially not the kind that reflected sunlight into her front yard. When she first saw Ethan's home, she froze in her car and stared at the black panels glinting on the roof. To her, they looked like rebellion, ugly, industrial slabs ruining the visual harmony of Maple Ridge. That night, she emailed the board. By the next morning, the wheels of bureaucracy had begun to turn. Ethan found the first letter on his doorstep 2 days later. It was printed on thick white paper with the HOA's logo at the top. The tone was polite at first. "Dear Mr. Miller, it has come to our attention that modifications to your roof have been made without aesthetic review or prior board approval." He chuckled as he read it, certain it was a mistake. He had the county's signed approval and inspection documents stored in a binder. Surely they wouldn't question something that the government had already approved. But 3 days later, another letter arrived, this one less friendly. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $500 and potential legal action. That was when the laughter stopped. The next morning, Ethan stepped outside to find 2 men in blue shirts standing at the edge of his driveway, holding clipboards. One of them was taking photos of his roof. The other was marking something on a sheet. Ethan walked up to them calmly. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked. The older man barely looked up. "Routine inspection," he said. "Ordered by the HOA." Ethan frowned. "You're on private property. I didn't authorize this." The man shrugged. "We don't need authorization when it concerns community compliance." The words hit like static, cold, rehearsed, and wrong. "Compliance." Ethan repeated. "I built that system by the book. I've got all the documents to prove it." The man glanced at his partner, smirked slightly, and said, "Take it up with the board." Then they walked off without another word. That evening, Ethan sat at his kitchen table surrounded by papers. The soft light from the solar-powered lamp above him glowed steadily, a small reminder of the independence he had built for himself. He opened his binder, permits, receipts, legal codes, and county approvals, all perfectly aligned. There was no mistake. What the HOA was doing wasn't about law, it was about control. And Karen Blake, with her hunger for uniformity, couldn't stand the idea that someone in her neighborhood didn't need the grid, the rules, or her approval to live well. The next day, he tried diplomacy. He walked to the HOA office, a small beige building at the end of the cul-de-sac, where a brass plaque read Maple Ridge Community Board, Unity Through Order. Inside, Karen sat behind a desk stacked with paperwork, smiling without warmth. "Mr. Miller," she said smoothly, "what a surprise." Ethan placed his binder on the desk. There must be a misunderstanding. My solar setup is fully approved. Here's every permit. Karen didn't even glance at the papers. I'm sure you believe that, she said, her tone dripping with politeness. But Maple Ridge has community standards. We require board review for all external modifications. Your panels, I'm afraid, disrupt our neighborhood's appearance. Ethan's jaw tightened. They are legal. Legal doesn't always mean acceptable, she replied. We're not against solar energy, Mr. Miller, but your panels are visible from the street. That violates Section 4B of our Community Aesthetic Code. He exhaled slowly. So you're saying I need to hide the sun? She gave a thin smile. You need to comply, or there will be consequences. When Ethan left the office, his hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the slow boil of disbelief. He'd built his life on logic, on systems that made sense. But this was different. This was power for power's sake. He walked home in silence, the late afternoon sun glinting off his panels as if mocking their threat. That night, another letter appeared, this one marked final notice. They were serious, but so was he. Over the next week, the situation escalated. The HOA began sending him citations daily, each one more aggressive than the last. They accused him of lowering property values, violating visual consistency, and even causing glare hazards. Neighbors started whispering when he passed by. Some looked sympathetic, others looked afraid. One evening, his next-door neighbor, an elderly man named Carl, stopped by with a nervous smile. Ethan, he said quietly, I got a call from the board today. They're asking if anyone else has problems with your panels. I told them no, but you should watch yourself. Karen doesn't lose. Ethan nodded slowly. Then maybe she hasn't met the right opponent. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure didn't stop. They threatened to shut off his water access, suspend his trash collection, even file for a lien against his property. But Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he began preparing. Late at night, he sat at his desk, sketching diagrams, checking schematics, reviewing the electrical grid that connected the HOA's community center. Their offices, their decorative fountains, all of it tied to one shared feeder line. A line that, he noticed with quiet satisfaction, crossed directly through his property. They wanted a fight. He'd give them one, but not with anger, with precision. One morning, Karen showed up again, this time with 2 board members in tow. She stood at the edge of his driveway, clipboard in hand. This is your last chance, she called out. Take them down voluntarily, or we'll have workers do it for you. Ethan looked at her, calm and unshaken. You touch my property, he said softly, and you'll regret it. Karen smirked. Is that a threat? No, he said, turning back toward his door. It's a prediction. Later that afternoon, he watched from his window as 2 men in orange vests arrived with ladders. They began dismantling one of the roof panels, laughing as they worked. He didn't stop them. He didn't yell. He simply noted the time, took photographs, and walked back inside. As the first panel came down, Karen stood nearby, arms folded, her smile wide. She thought she had one. But what she didn't know was that the moment her workers pulled those wires, they severed the line that supplied backup power to the HOA's own facilities. The lights at their office would go dark by sunset, and when the complaints started rolling in from residents wondering why the streetlights didn't turn on, she'd finally understand what happens when you push an engineer too far. That night, Ethan sat outside under the stars, his house glowing softly from battery storage, the rest of Maple Ridge cloaked in darkness. He could see flashlights flickering on distant porches, people shouting, confusion spreading. He didn't smile, but there was a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. They had called his power system ugly. Now they were learning what ugly really felt like. The helpless silence of a neighborhood that depended on control, suddenly powerless because of its own arrogance. As he leaned back in his chair, the hum of his generators steady and smooth, Ethan whispered to the night, They wanted me to take down my power. I think they just learned who really runs the lights around here. The moonlight glinted off the remaining panels on his roof, bright and defiant, and in that moment, the war had truly begun. The morning after the blackout, the entire neighborhood buzzed with confusion. Residents woke to dead security gates, alarm clocks that never went off, and refrigerators slowly warming as the power outage stretched into its second day. But at the far end of the cul-de-sac, Ethan Miller's house stood bright as dawn. Lights glowing warmly behind his windows, coffee brewing as if nothing had happened. To anyone passing by, it looked like a miracle or a provocation. Word spread fast. People started whispering that Ethan had something to do with it, that maybe he'd sabotaged the HOA grid after their inspection. By noon, HOA members gathered near the community fountain, ironically dry now without power, and Karen Blake's voice could be heard above the crowd, sharp and commanding. "This is vandalism," she shouted. "Someone's tampered with our systems. We'll find out who's responsible." But everyone already knew where her glare was aimed. From his porch, Ethan watched her pacing in her designer heels, phone pressed to her ear as she barked orders. He didn't hide, didn't flinch. He simply sipped his coffee and waited. He knew she'd come to him eventually, and sure enough, minutes later, her SUV screeched to a stop in front of his gate. She stepped out, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "You think this is funny?" she demanded. Ethan looked up, calm as ever. "What's funny?" "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "Half the neighborhood's without power. You were the last one they visited. You think we don't notice your house glowing like a beacon while everyone else sits in the dark?" He raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a problem with your infrastructure. You might want to call a real engineer." Karen's jaw tightened, but Ethan could see something else behind her rage, a flicker of fear. She didn't understand the systems she controlled. Her authority lived on paper, on bylaws and signatures, not on real knowledge. And now, for the first time, that power had failed her. "We'll have this fixed by tonight," she said firmly, as if trying to convince herself more than him. "And when we do, you're going to face serious penalties for interference." Ethan smiled faintly. "Good luck with that. You'll find I'm the one who followed the rules. You're the one who didn't." Then he stood, his tone sharpening just enough to cut through the air. "You stepped onto my property. You damaged my system. I have photos, recordings, and permits to prove it. So before you start throwing around accusations, you might want to remember, you started this." She didn't reply. For a long moment, the two stood in silence, the hum of Ethan's generator filling the air between them. Then Karen turned on her heel, stormed back to her SUV, and sped off, tires spitting gravel. Ethan watched her go, a shadow of grim satisfaction crossing his face. He didn't want war, but if they kept coming, he wouldn't hesitate to finish what they started. That afternoon, HOA trucks rolled up and down the streets, technicians scrambling to figure out why the power wouldn't come back on. They tested switches, replaced fuses, even called the county utility department. Nothing worked. Every time they tried to reroute the current, the circuit tripped again. What they didn't know was that their system had been quietly leaching supplemental power from Ethan's property for years, an old arrangement set up by the developer before the HOA even existed. When Karen's workers dismantled his panels, they severed their own lifeline. Ethan hadn't lifted a finger to cause this blackout. They'd done it to themselves. As evening fell, the HOA sent out a mass email to all residents, blaming the outage on a technical failure and promising restoration soon. But inside their boardroom, panic was brewing. Ethan knew this because one of the younger residents, a man named Derek, stopped by his property later that night. Derek wasn't like the others. He worked in IT, logical, quiet, and curious. He stood awkwardly at Ethan's gate, flashlight in hand. "Hey, Mr. Miller," he said hesitantly. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan nodded. "Go ahead." "I used to work on grid backups in college," Derek said. "And what the HOA's saying doesn't make sense. The failure happened right after they touched your system. You didn't do anything to cause this, did you?" Ethan chuckled softly. "No, son. I didn't do a thing. But maybe now they'll learn what happens when they tamper with something they don't understand." Derek nodded slowly, realizing the truth. They really messed up, didn't they? Worse, Ethan said. They think they're still in control. By the next morning, tempers were boiling across Maple Ridge. Residents flooded the HOA office demanding answers. Without power, their homes were uncomfortable, their security systems dead, and their freezers full of spoiled food. The once proud community that bragged about order and perfection was now falling apart. Ethan watched it all unfold from a distance, the calm center of a storm they had built themselves. Yet even as he felt vindicated, part of him knew this wasn't over. People like Karen didn't admit defeat, they doubled down. Sure enough, around noon, a white van marked County Electric Inspection arrived at his gate. Ethan's instincts went sharp. The two men who stepped out weren't from the county. Their uniforms were too new, their badges laminated instead of engraved. He walked out to meet them, his voice steady but cold. "Can I help you?" One of them cleared his throat. "We're here to inspect the unauthorized modifications made to your solar setup." Ethan smirked. "Unauthorized? Let me see your work order." The men exchanged glances. "We don't need you're trespassing," Ethan interrupted, his tone firm. "And I'm recording this. So unless you've got official papers signed by the county, you're leaving." The men hesitated, muttered something under their breath, and retreated to their van. When they drove off, Ethan saw a familiar black SUV parked further down the road. Karen was watching, phone in hand, her expression tight. That night, she sent another letter, this time with bold red text across the top, "Final violation notice." It accused him of tampering with community utilities and demanded immediate removal of all unauthorized power systems. But Ethan only laughed as he read it. She was losing control, and every desperate move she made pushed her further into her own trap. He placed the letter carefully into a growing folder labeled Evidence. Then he powered up his laptop and began drafting a report of his own, complete with photos, timestamps, and a detailed account of the HOA's illegal interference with his property. He wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was building a case. As the rain began to fall outside, thunder rolling softly across the hills, Ethan sat by his window, his house glowing warmly while the rest of the neighborhood stayed dark. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the faint sound of a generator sputtering, a temporary fix from the HOA office, but even that soon failed. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes reflecting the flicker of his computer screen, and whispered to himself, "You wanted me to take down my power. Now you don't even have your own." By the time the storm passed, the lesson had already begun to settle into the bones of Maple Ridge. They thought they could push a man who built his life around energy, precision, and discipline. But Ethan wasn't just another homeowner. He was the kind of man who knew that every system, whether electrical or human, has a breaking point. And the HOA had just found theirs. The next morning, sunlight spilled across Maple Ridge like nothing had happened, but the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. The blackout was over, the county had restored emergency service lines, but the neighborhood was far from calm. Residents were furious, whispering about mismanagement, about incompetence, about how the once perfect HOA had brought chaos to their peaceful lives. And though the lights were back, people had begun to notice something else. The power wasn't steady anymore. Lights flickered at night, the community gate stalled twice that morning, and the fountain by the clubhouse sputtered like a dying heart. Everything that used to run smoothly now trembled, as if the system itself was nervous. But Ethan Miller's home, tucked at the edge of the cul-de-sac, glowed steady as ever, powered by his own private grid. His solar array hummed quietly in the sunlight, his batteries charged, his independence complete. Inside, Ethan moved through his workshop with calm precision. His tools were neatly arranged on the pegboard, his notebooks stacked in perfect order. He wasn't angry, not anymore. He had moved past anger into something sharper, colder. This was strategy now. He'd learned long ago that power wasn't just about voltage or current, it was about control. And the HOA had tried to control him using the only weapon they understood: paperwork and fear. Now, he would use their own system against them. Every fine they sent, every false accusation, every unlawful visit. They were all becoming part of a bigger picture. A pattern. A case. Ethan had seen corporate power plays before, the way small tyrants hid behind policies and procedure. The key wasn't to fight back with emotion. It was to make them destroy themselves by following their own rules. He spent hours that day gathering everything: copies of every letter, photos of the trespassing workers, timestamps of the outage, and the county permits proving his system's legality. He built a digital archive, labeling every folder with meticulous detail. HOA violation evidence, unauthorized access, tampering with private utility. Each file was another nail in the coffin of their arrogance. And as he worked, he thought about the people running that HOA, sitting in their air-conditioned office, certain they held all the cards. They had no idea that the man they'd pushed was an engineer who spent 30 years designing energy systems for the state grid. Systems that could power cities or cripple them. That afternoon, he took a drive around the neighborhood. He wasn't just sightseeing, he was observing. Every community light post, every electric junction box, every buried connection between homes told a story. The HOA's infrastructure wasn't built from scratch. It was an extension of the original developer's blueprint. And that blueprint ran right through Ethan's property, literally. The underground utility line that fed the HOA's administrative center and its security system crossed beneath his northern fence line, part of a deal signed decades ago when the land belonged to someone else. It was old, outdated, and never renegotiated. Ethan smiled as he traced the path on his tablet. If the HOA thought they had power over him, they were about to learn that they were standing on borrowed ground, connected to the one man they couldn't intimidate. Back at the HOA office, Karen Blake wasn't doing so well. She sat behind her desk, pale and tired, flipping through complaints from residents demanding refunds for spoiled food, broken security, and damaged appliances. The HOA's emergency fund was nearly empty, drained by constant repair bills and legal fees from smaller disputes. And now, a new email from the county building department made her blood run cold. It was a formal notice that Ethan Miller's solar installation had been inspected and cleared for independent operation. The county had even noted that his system contributed surplus energy to the main grid during peak hours. In simple terms, he wasn't the problem, he was part of the solution. Karen slammed her fist on the desk so hard the coffee mug rattled. "That man is mocking me," she hissed. "He thinks he's untouchable." One of her board members, a nervous man named Howard, looked up from his phone. "Maybe we should just leave him alone," he said carefully. "We've already had enough bad press after the outage." Karen shot him a glare that could cut glass. "No. If we let one person break the rules, the whole system collapses. He made us look weak. I'll fix this." But deep down, for the first time, she wasn't sure how. That night, while the HOA board argued over what to do, Ethan sat in his living room, lights low, laptop open. The hum of his system was soft but steady, the sound of control. He wasn't planning revenge in the traditional sense. He didn't need to. The HOA's next move would come soon, and when it did, he would be ready to strike back, not with force, but with exposure. He began drafting a detailed report addressed to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, documenting Maple Ridge HOA's pattern of harassment, misuse of authority, and unlawful interference with private property. He attached photos, official correspondence, and audio recordings of their threats. Then he saved a copy to a secure drive and another to a private email folder titled "For Release." He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the solar inverter. The world outside was quiet, except for the distant sound of rain beginning to fall against the window. He smiled faintly. Everything about this fight reminded him of his old days working with the grid. The way pressure built up quietly, slowly, until one wrong move sent everything crashing down. That was what the HOA didn't understand. They thought power was about dominance. But true power was about patience, timing, and knowing when to flip the right switch. Across the street, Karen couldn't sleep. She paced her living room, the dim light of her phone's screen reflecting in her eyes. Her inbox was overflowing with messages, complaints, refund requests, warnings from the board's lawyer. But one email caught her attention. A message from an anonymous sender titled, "You should have left him alone." Her heart pounded as she opened it. Inside were photos, her workers trespassing on Ethan's property, dismantling his panels, and laughing while they did it. Every image was time-stamped and geotagged. At the bottom was a short message: tampering with private energy systems carries a federal penalty. You might want to check the law before you dig deeper. She stared at the screen, her stomach twisting. It didn't say who sent it, but she knew. The next morning, a heavy fog rolled over Maple Ridge, muting the colors of the neighborhood. Ethan stepped outside, feeling the chill on his skin. The air smelled of rain and pine. He walked to the edge of his property and looked out toward the HOA's administrative building in the distance. It stood dark and still, its lights flickering weakly against the fog. He knew they were struggling. Their system couldn't handle the load without the power flow his solar line once provided. And it wouldn't be long before the inspectors traced the fault directly to them. The irony made him laugh under his breath. Later that day, as he checked the battery levels on his home system, a notification popped up on his computer screen, an alert from the county energy grid. It showed a sharp drop in power stability across the HOA sector, red warnings flashing beside their feeder node. He leaned back, watching the numbers fluctuate, and muttered, "You still think I'm the problem, Karen?" He could fix it in minutes, reroute the backup through his old connection, restore stability for everyone. But he didn't. Not yet. They had to feel it first, the frustration, the weakness, the cost of their arrogance. Only then would they understand the power of leaving people in peace. That night, as the fog thickened and the streetlights began to blink out one by one, Ethan sat on his porch with a quiet grin. His house was bright as ever, glowing like a lantern in the mist. The wind carried faint voices from across the lake. The HOA board meeting in panic again, arguing over technical failures they couldn't comprehend. Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and whispered to the night, "You built this world on control, and you forgot. Power doesn't come from rules. It comes from knowledge." The panels on his roof caught a sliver of moonlight, reflecting it back like steel. He didn't need to fight them anymore. The system itself was finishing the job for him. By the time morning light broke over Maple Ridge, the tension between Ethan Miller and the HOA had reached its boiling point. The air felt heavy, like a storm that hadn't yet decided whether to rain or thunder. For weeks, Ethan had stayed calm, patient, and calculated, letting the HOA expose their own ignorance. He hadn't fought with anger, hadn't raised his voice, but the silence had unnerved them. To people like Karen Blake, silence wasn't peace, it was defiance. And she couldn't tolerate defiance. That Friday, she decided to take action without another meeting, without another vote. She wanted to make an example out of Ethan once and for all. It began at sunrise. Ethan was on his porch, sipping his coffee, when he heard the unmistakable growl of diesel engines echoing down the hill. He looked up and saw 3 HOA trucks pull into his street, their tires grinding against the gravel. Men in orange vests stepped out, carrying ladders, power tools, and boxes of equipment. A white SUV followed behind them, Karen's. She climbed out, sunglasses on, clipboard in hand, her expression tight and triumphant. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. He set his coffee down and walked to the end of his driveway as the workers began unloading. "Morning," he said calmly, voice steady. "Can I help you?" Karen smirked, tapping her clipboard. "We're just here to fix a problem, Mr. Miller. The board voted unanimously last night. Your unauthorized solar panels are to be removed immediately." Ethan let out a slow breath, barely holding back the laugh that threatened to escape. "Unauthorized?" he repeated. "You've seen the permits. You know they're legal." She gave a shallow shrug. "Legal doesn't mean approved. This is a private community. You violated our code by altering your roofline without design consent. You had your chance to comply, and you ignored it. So now we're taking care of it for you." The workers were already dragging their ladders toward his house. One man began uncoiling a set of heavy electrical cutters. Ethan stepped forward, his voice still calm but sharper now. You so much as touch one wire on my system, and you'll be in violation of federal property law. Those panels are connected to the grid, and you don't have jurisdiction here. Karen tilted her head, smiling like a teacher scolding a stubborn student. That's what you think, she said sweetly. But we consulted our legal advisor. Everything we're doing is within our rights. Ethan gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. Your legal advisor's wrong, he said softly. And you just made the biggest mistake of your career. He didn't raise his voice, didn't move to stop them. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching as the men set up ladders and climbed onto his roof. One by one, they began unscrewing the mounts, prying panels loose, cutting through the connections he'd carefully built. Every spark that flickered from their tools felt like a nail driving into the heart of his patience. Karen stood with her arms crossed, satisfied. See, she said quietly, all it takes is a little enforcement. You'll thank us later when your property matches the rest of the neighborhood. Ethan didn't reply. He just took out his phone, walked to the side of his truck, and began recording everything. Faces, equipment, license plates. The moment one of the men disconnected a live circuit without grounding it properly. He knew exactly what that would cause. Sparks flew, a sharp crack echoed through the air, and one of the workers yelped, dropping his tool. Watch it, another shouted. The sound made Karen flinch. Careful, she barked. But it was too late. In their arrogance, they disrupted a section of conduit that fed directly into the HOA's own power relay. An underground connection that looped through Ethan's line before branching off to their office, gates, and security lights. They didn't realize that in tearing out what they called illegal, they were ripping apart the system that quietly powered half their community. By the time they packed up and left, the sun was high and the air was hot. Karen smiled as she turned to leave, confident she'd finally broken him. You'll receive a notice for removal costs, she said coldly. And once your property's reviewed for compliance, we can talk about reinstating your privileges. Ethan didn't even look at her. He just said, "You're done, Karen." She laughed. "I've heard that before." "Not like this," he replied. His voice was quiet, but there was something in it that made her pause. Then she shook her head, climbed into her SUV, and drove off, dust swirling behind her tires. For a few hours, the neighborhood was quiet. The HOA workers moved on to their next task, thinking the day's work was over. But around mid-afternoon, residents began noticing something strange. The fountains stopped running again. The sprinkler timers didn't activate. The office Wi-Fi dropped. By sunset, the streetlights failed to come on, and the security gates froze in the open position. Panic spread quickly. Phones lit up across Maple Ridge as residents called the HOA office, demanding answers. Karen rushed back from her dinner engagement to find the boardroom in chaos. "What happened?" she snapped. The maintenance supervisor looked pale. "It's not us," he stammered. "The whole substation's down again. The circuit won't hold. We tried rerouting, everything's dead. Even the backup." "How?" she barked. "We just restored it." The man hesitated, then added, The relay runs through Mr. Miller's property. It always has. The old developer set it up that way years ago. We disconnected part of it when we removed his system." Karen's face drained of color. "You mean we cut our own line," he finished weakly. By the time she drove past Ethan's house that evening, Maple Ridge was a patchwork of dark homes. Only one property was still lit, the one she tried to crush. Ethan sat on his porch, bathed in the warm glow of his self-sustaining power, reading a book like nothing had happened. When her SUV slowed in front of his driveway, he didn't even look up. She rolled down her window and shouted, "You did this. You're sabotaging the neighborhood." He looked up from his book, his tone even and almost kind. "No, Karen," he said. "You did this when you decided you knew more about power than the man who built it." Then he stood, set his book down, and walked to the edge of his fence. "You wanted me off your grid. Congratulations. You're on your own now." She didn't reply. She just sat there, gripping the steering wheel as the realization sank in. The HOA's pride, its rules, its arrogance, all of it had backfired spectacularly. The lights on her dashboard flickered, her air conditioning stuttered, and somewhere down the street, a transformer popped with a sharp crack that echoed through the night. Ethan turned away and went back to his porch, the hum of his home steady and strong behind him. That night, the neighborhood descended into chaos. Residents shouted from their porches, flashlights sweeping through the dark. The HOA's emergency hotline crashed from the flood of calls. Karen tried to send a mass message, but the office server was dead. By midnight, the only light left in all of Maple Ridge was the warm golden glow from Ethan's cabin at the edge of town. He sat there in silence, watching moths flutter near the porch light, the faint echo of frustration rising from the houses across the hill. He didn't feel joy, just quiet satisfaction. They'd called his system an eyesore. Now, in the darkness, it was the only thing beautiful left in the neighborhood. He leaned back in his chair, the wind rustling through the trees, and whispered to himself, "They took my panels because they feared independence. Now they'll understand what dependence costs." The sound of distant voices faded, replaced by the low hum of his batteries charging from the moonlight. For the first time since this battle began, he didn't need to plan or fight anymore. He had already won, not through anger, but through consequence. The HOA had cut its own cord, and all Ethan had to do now was watch as their empire of rules crumbled quietly in the dark. That night, Maple Ridge looked nothing like the perfect neighborhood it claimed to be. The rows of identical homes that once glowed softly under the white streetlights were now shadows, quiet, dark, and lifeless. The only sound was the restless murmur of confused residents, the low hum of flashlights cutting through the pitch-black streets. Every gate was frozen open, every decorative light dead, and every fountain still. Even the security cameras on the corners blinked once before fading to black. The HOA's control over its perfect world had vanished overnight. But at the far edge of the neighborhood, one home stood lit like a lighthouse in the fog, Ethan Miller's house. His solar-powered system purred quietly, feeding his home with steady current while the rest of the community stumbled in darkness. From his porch, Ethan watched the panic unfold like a slow-moving play. He could see flashlights darting between driveways, hear neighbors shouting, and smell the faint ozone from dying power lines. He didn't smile, but there was a calm in his chest that hadn't been there in weeks. The HOA had taken his panels, insulted his work, and called him a problem. But now, their problem was the only one who still had light, heat, and hot coffee. Around midnight, there was a knock at his door, loud, desperate, and familiar. He didn't even have to check who it was. Karen Blake stood there, drenched from the rain, hair stuck to her face, flashlight trembling in her hand. Behind her, two board members looked pale and angry. "You've made your point," she said, trying to sound calm but failing. "Turn the power back on." Ethan blinked slowly. "Excuse me." "We know you did this," Karen snapped. "You cut the feed to the substation when you took your system offline. Don't pretend you didn't." Ethan tilted his head, his tone mild. "You mean when your workers trespassed and ripped apart my legally installed panels? You mean when you destroyed the very line that was powering half your office's backup systems?" He leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet but sharp. "I didn't cut anything, Karen. You did that yourself. You just didn't bother to check what you were cutting." For a moment, the three of them just stood there in the rain, blinking at him like people who had seen a ghost. Karen's voice cracked. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You sabotaged us." Ethan sighed. "Karen, I built this system from scratch. I know exactly what it connects to. You, on the other hand, have been running your fancy HOA empire on a network that hasn't been inspected in 20 years. The developer tied your administrative building's grid through my property to save money. You cut that connection when you tore down my panels. So, technically, I didn't shut you down, you unplugged yourself." Her jaw clenched, the truth cutting deeper than she could admit. "You're lying," she muttered. Ethan shrugged. "Then call an electrician. But make sure they bring a flashlight." The man beside her stepped forward, his tone cautious. "Can you fix it?" Ethan looked at him for a long moment. "I could," he said finally. But I won't. Not until you admit what you did. You called me a hazard, an eyesore, a lawbreaker. You destroyed property you didn't own, and you violated state energy codes. So if you want help, you can start with the truth. Karen's voice trembled with a mix of rage and humiliation. We'll sue you. Ethan gave a soft laugh. You already tried that with your letters. You're welcome to try again, but this time, I'll have the county's legal department sitting beside me. He stepped back, the light from his house spilling onto the porch, warm against the cold rain. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to enjoy my evening in the one house you didn't manage to ruin. He shut the door quietly, leaving Karen and her board members standing in the downpour, powerless in more ways than one. By morning, chaos had spread through every corner of Maple Ridge. The HOA's servers were down, emails unanswered, calls to their office ringing into silence. Without electricity, the gates couldn't open, deliveries were delayed, and tempers flared. Residents began demanding refunds, angry that their HOA dues had gone toward decorations instead of maintenance. The same people who once praised Karen for her leadership now shouted at her across lawns, accusing her of negligence. Someone even spray-painted the words, "Where's our power?" on the clubhouse sign. For years, the HOA had been the unshakable authority in the community. Now, it was a joke whispered between neighbors in the dark. Meanwhile, Ethan was busy, not gloating, but documenting. Every call, every outburst, every admission from HOA members who came begging for help. He logged it all. He knew this was bigger than petty revenge. This was a record of abuse and failure that would expose how fragile their authority really was. Late that afternoon, as the sky turned orange, he drove into town to meet with a contact at the county energy department. The engineer there, an old colleague named Harris, listened carefully as Ethan laid out the situation. When he finished, Harris let out a low whistle. They did what? Ethan nodded. Cut through a live line, destroyed certified solar property, and caused a community-wide outage. Harris shook his head in disbelief. That's not just stupid, that's illegal. You've got enough here to file a claim with the state. Ethan smiled faintly. I was hoping you'd say that. By the time he returned home that evening, county trucks were already making their way into the neighborhood, orange lights flashing in the dusk. Workers examined utility boxes, traced broken conduits, and made notes on clipboards. Residents gathered in small groups, watching nervously as the truth started to spread. Someone pointed at Ethan's house, whispering, "That's the guy who warned them. The one they fined." Another voice replied, "Maybe he should have been running the HOA instead." The tide was turning, and Karen could feel it. She watched from her window, face pale, as the county engineers spoke with residents, explaining that the HOA had violated multiple safety codes. At dawn the next morning, the HOA office received an official notice from the county, a cease and desist order for all maintenance activities and an immediate investigation into property tampering and negligence. Karen's phone exploded with messages, board members quitting one by one, homeowners demanding her resignation. She sat at her desk, staring at the screen as her entire empire crumbled, the reality settling in that she wasn't the enforcer anymore. She was the one being investigated. Across the ridge, Ethan stood outside his house watching the sunrise reflect off his newly repaired solar panels. He had reconnected his system overnight, restoring full power to his home and stabilizing his own grid line. The air smelled of wet pine and clean earth, the world quiet except for the gentle hum of his equipment. He looked out over the silent, powerless homes and thought of all the noise they used to make. Complaints, meetings, threats, and how quickly it had all gone dark. He didn't feel triumphant. He just felt free. As he turned back toward his door, a single email pinged on his phone. It was from the county attorney's office. "Mr. Miller, your complaint has been reviewed. We've opened a formal case against Maple Ridge HOA. You'll be contacted for testimony regarding unauthorized interference with state-certified solar infrastructure." Ethan stared at the message for a moment, then nodded to himself. The law had finally caught up with Arrogance. That evening, as the last light faded, The neighborhood was still dark except for one house, his. The glow from his windows spread faintly across the water, reflecting on the surface like fire. Ethan sat on his porch, hands folded, eyes fixed on the stars beginning to appear above the horizon. They wanted control, he murmured, voice soft but steady. They forgot who really understands power. His panels shimmered faintly under the moonlight, silent proof that knowledge, patience, and truth could outshine any authority built on fear. And somewhere in the dark, the broken wires of Maple Ridge whispered in agreement, carrying the lesson through the night. Some lights can't be turned off. The following morning arrived gray and heavy, the kind of sky that made the air feel thick with something unspoken. The residents of Maple Ridge shuffled through their routines without electricity, their once pristine lawns now dotted with generators humming like angry insects. Some people had already packed up and gone to stay with relatives, unable to tolerate the darkness and chaos that had consumed what was once their picture-perfect neighborhood. But the real storm wasn't in the sky, it was in the HOA office. Karen Blake sat behind her desk surrounded by stacks of paperwork, legal notices, and unanswered emails. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing, but she ignored it. The county investigation had escalated overnight. The engineer's report had been filed, and the findings were damning. Ethan Miller hadn't sabotaged anything. He hadn't interfered with a single wire. The blackout had been entirely caused by the HOA's own unlawful tampering with certified solar infrastructure and their illegal dependency on his private utility line. The evidence was undeniable. When the county inspector, a tall man with a calm but stern voice, arrived at the HOA office that morning, Karen tried to smile, but her confidence had cracked. "There must be some mistake," she said, her voice shaky. "We only acted in the community's interest." The inspector didn't even look up from his clipboard. "The community's interest," he said slowly, "doesn't excuse illegal interference with a privately owned power system. You dismantled a legally permitted installation without authority, destroyed state-approved energy equipment, and in the process, cut off power to 76 homes. That's not a mistake, Mrs. Blake, that's negligence." The word hit like a hammer. Karen's pen slipped from her fingers. "But the board approved it," she whispered. "The board," he replied, "doesn't override county law." The rest of the board sat in silence, pale and wide-eyed. Howard, the nervous man who had warned her weeks ago to stop, finally spoke. "We tried to tell you," he muttered. "You pushed too far." Karen's eyes snapped toward him, fury mixed with fear. "Don't you dare blame this on me," she hissed. We all agreed. But no one met her gaze. One by one, the other board members began gathering their things. One woman stood up, shaking her head. "We're done, Karen. We're not going down for this." Then she walked out, leaving the room heavy with the sound of footsteps fading into the hallway. Meanwhile, across the neighborhood, county trucks rolled in, orange lights flashing. Workers in reflective jackets began inspecting junction boxes, tracing the burnt conduit beneath the ground, and marking the damaged lines that once fed the HOA office. Residents watched from their porches, whispering to each other as they realized what had really happened. Rumors spread like fire. The HOA had destroyed the system that kept them powered, not Ethan. A few people even came by his property to apologize, their voices low and embarrassed. "We didn't know," one man said quietly. "We believed what they told us." Ethan nodded politely. "You don't have to apologize," he said. "You just needed to see the truth for yourself." That afternoon, a county official arrived at Ethan's home to take his full statement. He greeted them with quiet professionalism, showing them the photos, the recordings, the permits, the timestamps, everything he'd documented since the first letter from the HOA. The official flipped through the evidence slowly, expression unreadable. "You were thorough," he finally said. "You covered everything." Ethan smiled faintly. "I used to be an engineer. I learned a long time ago that people only listen when you show them proof." The man nodded. "You've done more than that. You've just exposed one of the most reckless HOA overreaches we've ever seen." By sunset, the story had spread beyond Maple Ridge. Local news vans lined the street, reporters setting up cameras near the community entrance. Headlines appeared online within hours. HOA destroys residents' solar system, cuts off power to entire neighborhood. Photos of the dark subdivision contrasted sharply with images of Ethan's glowing home, painting a clear picture of who was truly in control. Residents who had once avoided him now knocked on his door asking for help restoring their power. He didn't hold grudges. He helped where he could. He walked them through connecting small backup generators, explaining in simple terms how they could operate safely until the county restored the full system. Word spread that the quiet man at the edge of town knew more about the grid than anyone on the HOA board ever had. In the HOA office, panic turned into collapse. Karen's lawyer advised her to resign immediately, warning that the county's civil suit would soon turn into a criminal inquiry if she didn't cooperate. She sat there, staring at her reflection in the dark window, realizing how fast power could vanish. She had ruled over this neighborhood like a queen, issuing fines, demanding compliance, mocking those who didn't fit her vision of perfection. And now, she couldn't even turn on the lights in her own office. The irony stung worse than any punishment. The following day, a meeting was called in the community clubhouse, the one still running on temporary power. Nearly every homeowner attended, filling the room with restless voices. The county inspector stood at the front, explaining the report's conclusions in plain terms. The blackout, he said, was caused by unauthorized interference by the HOA with a private energy system. The property owner, Mr. Miller, followed all codes and regulations. The fault lies entirely with the association's leadership. The room erupted with gasps, then angry shouts. One man stood up, pointing at Karen. "You ruined this place," another shouted. "We trusted you." Karen sat frozen, unable to speak, her reputation unraveling before her eyes. The inspector cleared his throat. Effective immediately, he continued, the HOA's authority is suspended pending full investigation. The board is dissolved until further notice. Outside the clubhouse, Ethan stood quietly, watching people's faces change as they learned the truth. He didn't stay for applause or attention. He just wanted peace, the same peace he'd moved there for in the first place. As he turned to leave, one of the residents stopped him. "You could have just let us suffer," she said softly. "But you didn't." Ethan smiled. "That's not who I am. Power's not meant to punish, it's meant to teach." That night, as the stars began to flicker above the newly repaired power lines, the neighborhood slowly came back to life. Lights turned on one by one, laughter returned to the streets, and the hum of energy flowed again through the veins of Maple Ridge. But the HOA office stayed dark. Karen's resignation letter was posted on the door, her car gone by dawn. No one spoke her name again. Ethan sat on his porch, the faint reflection of his solar panels glowing under the moonlight. The air felt cleaner, freer, as if the whole neighborhood had exhaled after weeks of tension. He knew the investigation would drag on. The lawsuits would take months, maybe years, but that didn't matter. The truth was out. The power had shifted. He didn't need revenge anymore because justice had done the work for him. As he leaned back in his chair, he whispered into the quiet. They thought they could control the sun. Turns out, it doesn't answer to them. It never did. The panels on his roof shimmered faintly, steady as ever, and Maple Ridge slept beneath the honest light of a new beginning. The following week arrived bright and cold, a sharp wind cutting through Maple Ridge as if the air itself were trying to sweep away what had happened. The neighborhood looked the same as before, neatly trimmed lawns, identical mailboxes, the same white fences, but something deeper had changed. The silence that used to feel orderly now carried unease, and every neighbor who passed Ethan Miller's property did so with a quiet nod of respect or shame. The county had taken full control of the HOA's infrastructure, electricians working day and night to rewire the main grid and separate it permanently from Ethan's private system. For the first time in years, Maple Ridge was free from its own illusion of control. Ethan spent those mornings walking along the lake behind his house, the reflection of his solar panels gleaming on the water. His home stood as a symbol now, not of defiance, but of resilience. The reporters had stopped coming, but the story still spread across news feeds. Engine's solar system exposes HOA corruption. Strangers online called him a hero, though he never felt like one. He hadn't set out to destroy anyone, only to protect what was his. Yet as he stood at the edge of his dock, listening to the hum of his inverter in the distance, he realized something. He hadn't just restored power to his home. He'd restored something far greater. The truth had power of its own. A week later, the county finished their final inspections. A white truck pulled up to Ethan's property, and the same inspector who had once questioned him stepped out, clipboard in hand and a faint smile on his face. "Mr. Miller," he said, shaking Ethan's hand, "we're officially closing the investigation. The county will be prosecuting Maple Ridge HOA for damages and illegal tampering. You're cleared of all accusations." Ethan nodded calmly. "I expected as much." "Also," the inspector added, "we're recommending you for a state commendation for your cooperation and documentation. You saved us months of work." Ethan gave a quiet chuckle. "I wasn't trying to be a hero," he said. "I was just tired of being bullied." The inspector's eyes softened. Sometimes that's how change starts. After the inspector left, Ethan sat down on his porch with a cup of coffee, the late afternoon sun spilling across the wooden steps. He could hear the sound of hammers and drills in the distance, residents repairing the damage caused by weeks of chaos. The HOA signs that once lined the community entrances had been taken down. The words "private community rules enforced" painted over. For the first time since he'd moved in, the neighborhood felt human again. Imperfect, messy, but alive. He watched kids playing near the road, laughing without being told to stay off the grass, their parents chatting without fear of fines or citations. Freedom, he thought, always looked simple when it finally returned. A few days later, a knock came at his door. When Ethan opened it, he found Derek, the young IT guy who had helped him early on, standing awkwardly with a nervous smile. "Hey, Derek said, scratching the back of his neck. "Some of us are organizing a community meeting, a real one this time. No board, no rules, just neighbors trying to figure out how to make this place right again. We were hoping you'd come." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You want me to run your meeting?" Derek shook his head quickly. No. We just thought you could talk. About how to keep things fair. About how to keep people like her from taking over again." Ethan looked past him toward the rows of homes glinting in the afternoon light. For a long moment, he said nothing, then nodded. "All right," he said, "but only if there's coffee." Derek grinned. "Plenty of that." That evening, the new meeting took place in the clubhouse, now lit again by a freshly installed line independent from the old HOA grid. The room was full, every homeowner in attendance, talking, laughing, and for the first time in years, listening. Ethan stood near the front, not as a leader but as a neighbor. He spoke plainly, his voice calm and steady. "What happened here," he said, "wasn't just about power or panels. It was about control. They thought rules mattered more than people. They forgot that a community isn't built by authority, it's built by respect. You don't need an HOA to tell you how to live. You just need to remember that your neighbor's peace is worth as much as your own." The room fell silent for a moment. Then applause spread slowly, genuine and warm. After the meeting, as night settled in, Ethan walked home under a sky glittering with stars. The streetlights flickered back to life one by one, steady and soft. For the first time in months, the power was stable, and this time, it belonged to everyone. When he reached his porch, he turned to look back at the neighborhood. The lights reflected on the windows of every house, a pattern of life and color returning to what had once been ruled by fear and order. He smiled faintly, whispering to himself, "Now that's balance." Later that night, sitting in his chair beside the window, Ethan opened his old laptop and wrote an email addressed to the County Energy Commission. It wasn't a complaint or a demand, just a suggestion. He proposed a program that would educate communities on renewable energy rights, helping homeowners understand the laws that protected them from overreach. He ended the email with a simple line, "No one should have to fight for the right to use the sun." He hit send, leaned back, and exhaled deeply. As midnight approached, the last of the day's sounds faded into quiet. The faint rustle of trees, the distant chirp of crickets, the low hum of energy flowing through wires once again whole. His panels gleamed faintly in the moonlight, their surfaces catching the silver glow of the sky. Everything felt still, restored. The war that had started with a letter and a petty demand had ended not with revenge, but with truth, patience, and knowledge. Down the hill, a faint light flickered in the old HOA office, the last remaining bulb connected to the temporary grid. It buzzed weakly before going out, leaving the building in darkness for good. Ethan watched from his window, his reflection faint against the glass, and whispered, "That's how power works. It always finds its way back to those who understand it." Then he stood, turned off his lamp, and let his home rest under the gentle hum of self-made light, peaceful and untouchable, while the rest of Maple Ridge finally learned to live in the balance he had built all along.